7 o'clock.
You confirm him.
Good evening, councillors. I can confirm that the live stream has now started.
Ready to start. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the meeting of the Environment and Climate Change. If you're watching from home, if you're an observer, welcome, and welcome to the councillors on the committee as well and the officers who are here. First of all, I'm going to ask Lisa if she will check the attendance.
Okay. Good evening, councillors. Tonight for attendance we have Councillor Ball, we have Councillor Darby, Councillor Eason, Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Hallam, Councillor Jackson, Councillor Lally, Councillor McRae, Councillor Marshall, Councillor Roberts Thompson, Councillor Skinner, Councillor Watts, Councillor Wilmot.
So thank you. It sounds
I've not been notified. I was going to say I've not been notified of any substitutions.
that sounds like everybody here who should be here. So do we have any declarations of interest?
I've not been informed of any declarations of interest unless members wish to inform me now.
Right, the next item is the minutes then. So can we take a vote on the minutes? Those in favour of the minutes, please, Lisa.
I think Councillor Darby was just trying to attract your attention. He's waving, but Ray, you're muted.
Oh, I can't hear him.
Councillor Darby, you're muted at the moment. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. I got the camera on, but not the other. But the Councillor Tyler was trying to get on a few moments ago. I was just talking to him. That's what delayed me. But I don't know whether he's in the meeting. Is he on the meeting? I don't know. But he was certainly talking to me, and he was listening.
He might be just wanting to observe.
Okay, fine.
Okay, so back to the minutes then. Could you take a vote on the minutes, please, Lisa?
I think someone has to second them, propose them.
Well, I propose that we accept the minutes as a true record.
And seconded, Councillor Watts.
Okay, fine.
Okay, if you can unmute your mic when I call your name and either vote for, against or abstain. Councillor Ball.
For.
Councillor Darby.
For.
Councillor Eason.
For.
Councillor Fletcher.
For.
Councillor Hallam.
For.
Councillor Jackson.
For.
Councillor Lally.
For.
Councillor McRae.
For.
Councillor Marshall.
For.
Councillor Roberts Thompson.
For.
Councillor Skinner.
For.
Councillor Watts.
For.
Councillor Wilmot.
Abstain, I wasn't at the meeting.
Okay, that's carried, Chair.
Thank you. So the next item is item 4, which is Climate Change and Green Futures Programme update. The way we're going to manage this, because we have a huge document here, which we're very proud of, and Kevin Powell is going to introduce it briefly, and then we'll have a quick discussion on the climate change part, and then Paul Summers is going to talk about the fuel and the transport strategy, and we'll have a discussion on that. And because those two will later on be voted upon, and then we'll have a discussion on the general strands in the document. So we have in the strategy we have 15 strands altogether, and we have the opportunity to ask questions about those strands, and we'll endeavour to answer your questions on those because they form the whole programme. There's another thing that we've done on the agenda, and that is the noting reports that are together at item 7. So the reports that we don't have to vote on are just there as a little clump. That was tried at housing the other night and seemed very successful. So over to Kevin then to introduce this wonderful document. I have to say I'm really impressed with it. I'm really pleased with it. It's what I've been waiting for, because when I have to do talks or talk to people about what we're doing, it puts everything here in one place. Everything that we want to refer to is in one beautiful document. I will say that we are the privileged ones to have a copy of this. There are only a few copies made. Everybody else will get theirs online. So this lovely bound copy is for us to have a working document. If you don't need an actual paper copy, you could hand it over to the officers who might be pleased to have one to reflect the work that they've put into it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair, through you. I won't spend too much time introducing the report, as members have already no doubt read the documents. As the Chair has stated, I'll initially going to focus on the climate change pages, and that's pages 11 through to 45 of the programme update report. Now, in November of 2019, members noted a report that introduced the Climate Change and Green Futures programme. It contained 15 project strands in total, and a copy of that report is provided for information in Appendix 4 of this large document. Now, the project strand number 1 was the climate change strategy, and included in that part of the report was Action 4, and Action 4 was produce a climate change strategy document, which would act as an umbrella document, the Council's new carbon management plan, under which the programme would then be delivered. The report before members this evening provides an update of progress in terms of the Climate Change and Green Futures programme, so all 15 strands, and includes at strand 1 the climate change strategy, and at strand 2 and 3 the transport, fleet and fuel strategy. So the programme, this document, now acts as a delivery and governance mechanism for the delivery of the strategies. 15 separate authors and many more contributors played their part in the creation of this report. So my thanks go to all of those employees, and they've really demonstrated the need for this programme to be truly authority-wide. The climate change strategy begins at page 11. The statistical analysis has been enhanced since the November noting report to include the latest footprint data for financial year ending 2018-19. This documents a reduction in the Council's footprint of 45% during the life of the previous carbon management plan. Now, members will recall that this was presented to the committee in June of this year. A copy of that presentation is included again in this document at Appendix 1.1, just for your reference. So back to the climate change strategy. It also contains, on page 16, you may have noticed a timeline, which is provided as an A3 pullout within the document and illustrates some of the key events. It's not meant or not designed to be an exhaustive list because we couldn't fit it all on, but simply shows progress over time and more detailed information of the things that have been achieved can be found in each of the project strand reports. We hope the timeline is a useful addition and will be helpful to members, officers and residents as they look through the information. Now, demonstrating that the climate change strategy is a truly emerging strategy, section 6 highlights a number of potential future project strands, for example, ethical investments and the health effects of climate change. What it shows is the strategy cannot stand still, but rather as the science and our understanding matures, existing actions may need to be changed and new actions may need to be added. So finally, in section 7, this contains an enhanced list of actions. So this is the same for all of the project strands within the strategy, within the new programme. The initial actions within the noting report in November have been added to and enhanced. There are now 142 actions within the strategy, and these are detailed within the summary of strategic actions. So through you, Chair, I'm happy now to answer any questions that members may have regarding the climate change strategy. And I note your comment at the beginning that any questions relating to the individual project strands will be picked up as we touch on those later. You're muted, Councillor.
So this is general questions about the climate change strategy itself and not the individual strands. I would have to say that I think the timeline is an excellent device for sorting out our egos, because I'd like to think that it all started with me, but when you look at the timeline, you see that this has been going on with different regimes, and different ones of us have been responsible for causing this good work to happen. So it's good to see a timeline and a continuum of all the things that we're doing and still doing. So on the chat now, I have first of all Councillor Lally who'd like to speak.
Thank you, Chair. That's what I'm recycling. I've always accepted the fact that we seem to have sort of plateaued to a degree, and I welcome the section in the report. Can anyone see a way forward, or are other councils finding a way forward in this? Because we're still throwing away and landfilling and burning. I know most of it. Nearly half of the waste that we produce, which is an immense amount, really, at the end of the day. Is the only way forward now to sort of reduce packaging at a national level, and is that where we're going to sort of aim our efforts? There doesn't seem to be anything in there which says, right, we're going to add another 10% to our recycling rate by doing such and such, such and such, such and such. Yeah.
Okay.
Is this a good question now, or do we leave it for strand 9?
We can ask Paul Wolverson to pick that up on strand 9.
I'm sorry, I'm too early, am I?
Yeah, just jumped in there. But the corporate plan that the council has adopted recently includes a target for recycling for 50% during the 4-year period. So there is a target. We don't repeat it in this document, but there is a target that exists. But we'll pick that up in a more detailed answer, if that's okay, Councillor Lally, in strand 9.
Lovely, thank you.
So next is Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Fletcher.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just want to say I thank the officers for their work. I think there is a lot of hard work that's gone into it. I think there are some good points. I think a lot of the issues are obviously national policies that will filter down to local government. And I do welcome the non-partisan approach, in particular the handout, the pull-out. I think it does show that all parties here are committed to reducing carbon emissions. So that's where I think the good points are. Moving on to, I suppose, more of the critical points. I do think that there is a lot of repetition. There's probably too much history involved. So I completely understand that we need to put this issue in terms of its historical context. But I think we could have done a lot more to streamline the document so it would be more accessible to members of the public, because after all, we do want them to be engaged. In terms of measurables, so obviously we do have this 2027 target, which is kind of an overall end target. But what I'm not seeing in the strategy is any individual targets for each one of the strands. I'm not going to go by strand basis, because I suppose that is just a general point. So if yourself or Kevin could confirm that, that would be brilliant. And something I have noted is that there does seem, and I would like the chair to confirm this, is there seems to be a watering down of the borough-wide target. So completely on board. We think we're on track to hit the reduction and become a carbon neutral council. But where it does seem to fail is its ambitions towards making the borough. Now that's partly because there's so many things that are out of the control, but obviously we have declared a year ago that there was a climate emergency. So I would like the chair to confirm that we are still taking the 2027 borough target into consideration, and we are on track to hit that as much as we can know at this point. In terms of some more of the points, I don't think there's too much about working from home on this, but I appreciate we're moving on to the strands now, so I'll probably leave that to a later point. One thing I do have to ask with Kevin is that the last time we discussed this, I think it was back in June, I did raise the point that scope 3 seems to be about procurement as well as other things, but I do note that there's certain elements of procurement that seem to have seeped into the strategy. So can I just confirm that we are looking at procurement, because I thought we'd parked that for now, and that was going to form a later strategy. And just some general points, obviously not that this can be helped, but you know, it is like you say, Kevin, it's a living, breathing document. I think it's unfortunate that we've got quite a big environment bill that should receive royal assent next year, which will obviously affect our approach to climate change, as it does introduce those legally binding targets on a number of the strands that we are talking about. But again, you know, that can't be helped, because we shouldn't stall our progress just because of national government legislation. But they're the general points I had to make, so if you would kindly come back on those, it'd be appreciated. Thank you.
Before Kevin answers, I will say that I am absolutely committed to 2027. I'm as enthusiastic as I ever was. In fact, I get more enthusiastic by the day. So Kevin, please.
Yes, OK, so I note your comment, Councillor Fletcher, that you feel that the report's too long. Apologies for that. This is our baseline report, so it was always going to be a fairly long document. You mentioned no individual targets. That is part of the work that we will be doing in terms of moving forward with each project strand. We're now in a really good position. We've got those actions, and we will be setting ourselves target. We've got to set ourselves a carbon budget. And I'll just touch on that, the other point that you raised with regard to scope 3. Scope 3 has never been out of scope. Apologies for the use of the word twice. But if you look at page 19 of the strategy, that contains the, excuse me, I'm just going to have to put the light on. It contains a number of actions for the, this is page 19, I do apologise, page 19 within the this document, which is the Climate Change and Green Futures Programme document. It talks about the different actions for the climate change strategy, and it covers level 3 emissions. So it's action number 3, establish a baseline for CO2 emissions based on scope 3 emissions and sources. So that's our supply chain, our housing stock, our employee travel to work. That's all covered in scope 3, and it's definitely embraced within the strategy. So hopefully that's answered that question. You're quite right with regard to the environment bill. We've also got the other piece of legislation, which will be the resources and waste strategy. That will impact on the approaches that we take as well, and may bring with it extra burdens funding, but it also may bring clearly extra tasks and extra work for us to do. Working from home, we can touch on that later, and it is mentioned in both the business mileage, employee mileage strand, which I think is strand 5, and it's also mentioned in strand 13, which is the technology strand. So we'll pick that up later as well. In terms of the watering down, I think Councillor Skinner has answered that question. If you read through the section in terms of our communications plan, and particularly it's in, I believe, Appendix 3, our climate change campaign plan, that's all about engaging with businesses, schools and residents. That's all about trying to create the necessary environment for behavioural change. And we are also at the moment engaged with the rest of the Nottinghamshire authorities, Broxtowe leading, in terms of bidding for some additional funding from central government in line with a common strategy across Nottinghamshire to promote the behavioural change activities that we are hoping to make a common initiative across the whole of Nottinghamshire. Hopefully that's answered your questions, Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you. Councillor Marshall next.
Thank you, Chair. I guess before we get into more of the detail, I'd just like to congratulate the authority on producing this document. If there was ever any doubt that climate change and the impending climate crisis wasn't the number one, or at least one of the main priorities of this authority, well, they know now. And this document is comprehensive and detailed and allows the platform for that. Mr. Powell said, of course, that this is a breathing document, and you can see that. Actions already undertaken and completed within that, allowing us to progress on that, and a comprehensive set of actions across the strands, allowing us to develop that over this administration into the future, and all political parties will have a role to play in that, and that should be welcomed. I think there is a wonderful opportunity for us in Strand 12, and I see that not only are we in effect addressing our own house and trying to address the impact that Broxtowe as an authority and as an organisation has, but Councillor Fletcher's point of how do you incorporate the wider domestic and private, I didn't want to be that stereotype, I'm sorry about the dog going off, how do you incorporate the wider domestic and private sector into delivering a net zero carbon for Broxtowe? I think the opportunities lie within the planning process, and we should put maximum leverage on that section and on those and on those mechanisms to allow us to deliver, and we should make it clear to those approaching our planning process that will be at the heart of all our planning decisions. And Councillor Watts, of course, as chair of that committee and vice chair of this committee, has that role and responsibility for future developments. So in that sense, this document is excellent and should be welcomed. The one question I have for Kevin on this particular section is just one around net zero in effect, Kevin, and it is this. We might not know it yet, and Councillor Watts made the point that there is still some way to go in reducing our own footprint around our carbon footprint. Have we got an idea yet? Do we have a feel yet around what our baseline operating carbon footprint is, which will allow us to effectively trade off within Broxtowe? We shouldn't export our problem, but allow us to trade off in Broxtowe to allow us to get to that net zero position, certainly for us as an authority.
Oh. You're muted.
Apologies. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Apologies for that. So thank you, Councillor Marshall, for that question. Currently, the baseline, as you can see from the document for the Borough Council, is 2,342 tonnes of carbon dioxide produced. That was at the end of 2018-19, and that didn't include our offsetting of 499 tonnes of that through purchase of green energy. So we don't use the offsetting mechanism yet. We are just showing our entire footprint. But we are already offsetting 499 tonnes through our use of green energy purchasing. Do I have a figure? I don't have a date. I don't have an idea of at what point does our outstanding carbon footprint, which will have to exist, and how much would that be in terms of offsetting? Our services are changing on an annual basis, so we have to keep monitoring that in terms of the footprint. So, for example, if we are asked by central government through the Waste and Resources Strategy to include another full round to collect food waste, then our footprint is going to go up. They're heavy lorries, they're using a significant amount of fuel, and that's going to increase our footprint. So we've got to, on a year-by-year basis, we've got to measure our footprint, and we've got to look at mitigating actions. And that's not going to stop in 2027. We may be at zero in 2027, which is our target and our aim, but we're going to have to continue that moving forward past that date. And also, I was speaking to Councillor Skinner about this subject earlier, and we don't know what technology is going to bring. We've got to keep monitoring technology, we've got to keep monitoring the science, and take opportunities as those opportunities arise. So no, we haven't got a definitive answer to that question. It's a very difficult question to answer at this stage, but we're certainly working toward those targets and have got the offsetting issue in mind.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Watts now.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to welcome this document. It is a massive piece of work, but a really vital one. The one thing that I think everybody on this committee understands is that the status quo is not an option. We can't simply carry on doing things the way that we have before. And this has really gone through every aspect of the work that the council does, the influence that we have within the borough, to make sure that we bring our carbon footprint down as low as possible, and that we help our residents to bring their carbon footprints down, so that not just Broxtowe Borough Council, but Broxtowe itself can be a zero carbon area. It's an absolutely fantastic starting point on which we can now build, as Kevin just said, individual programmes that will evolve from year to year as new challenges come, as new technologies come in to assist. But the key thing, I think, and the most important thing, is that this is a living document. It is something that is not just to go on a shelf and gather dust. It's not something that's just going to look pretty in the library. It's something that is going to be front and centre of the way that the council operates across every field. Greg actually beat me to the point about planning, that we can do an awful lot within planning to make a really positive difference. And I'm really looking forward to when we get to reviewing the core strategies and any alterations that we can bring within the local plan to amend that, because there is an awful lot that can be done. The original core strategy anticipated a lot coming into later parts of the work on planning, so we can take that forward and really push to make sure that what we build in Broxtowe is as close as we can be climate neutral, or even climate positive, to give things back. And we should be, and we can be, a borough that really takes the lead on this, and this gives us an excellent starting point. So I'd like to thank everybody who has been involved in putting this together, from the initial ideas, the planning, the writing, the conception, and also those who are now going to take it forward. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Roberts-Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I have three comments really on this, and firstly, it is a good baseline report, as we've heard, and it brings together most things together in terms of our climate change strategy. I do believe that it's very much over-presented, this booklet. It is actually, I understand you have had many different authors, but actually the repetition is difficult, and it's a pity that there wasn't more time and attention given to an editor that would eliminate that, because once you've read it all once, it's very difficult to read it all again. But that's, you know, part of the learning curve. My two questions really are about the vision. I'm a bit confused during, you know, your vision on page 12, and I don't have any objections to that, but I am confused whether the vision is really about the council or whether it's about the borough. And as we go through later on, you will see that some of it applies to the council, and most of this document really just applies to the council, but some of it also applies to the borough, for example, the air quality thing. So I would have liked that to be much clearer, you know, that brought out, so that we know whether we're dealing with council or whether we're dealing with a much wider issue. And my second point is really about context. for example, on page 17, the graph that we saw before, there is an assumption running through this that it is absolutely imperative that we do this. But sometimes we're missing the content. So the context, rather. So, for example, in that graph, yes, it looks lovely. We've reduced CO2 emissions. But really, does that mean that actually what has happened is that we've lost businesses and industries in the borough and they've gone elsewhere? And the same issue with context and what I've had a scant read, and so it may be here. But what about, I don't see anywhere the number of cars, the number of increase in the cars registered in the borough, because it's all very well saying we must do this, but what is the context in which we're hoping to achieve this?
Oh, thank you. That's hard.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts-Thompson. Yes, in terms of the repetition within the document, so I understand and note your comments. What I would say is that each of the reports can be removed from the document and be standalone, so that if they were read on a standalone basis, then they would stand in their own right. So that's the idea behind the report. I do appreciate that means that there is some repetition, and I can't apologise for that really, because that was the way it was designed, so that each report could be removed and stand on its own. In terms of the document, you're quite right, it can be confusing in terms of the council and the borough. The truth is that there's a focus on both. So we want to demonstrate as an organisation leadership, and in order to demonstrate leadership we have to undertake these activities ourselves, and then we would be wanting to use that in our communications plan and our communications campaign to actually help schools, residents and businesses do exactly what the council has done in terms of reducing its carbon footprint. So we want to establish that. Now the vision is about the council and the borough, and the document is in effect learning for the council, and then we'll be using that learning to apply to the wider borough. Context, lost cars and lost businesses. You're quite right, we haven't done any work in terms of whether businesses have moved elsewhere and that's reduced the carbon footprint. What I can say, if you note in the comment on page, I think it's page 18, following the graph, the majority of the reduction has been caused by the greening of the grid. So the government's move toward greening the grid has caused the majority of the reduction within the wider borough. That's not what's happened within the council. The council has taken positive action to install PV cells and LED lighting and reduce its fuel usage, buy electric vehicles and so on. They've taken positive action to reduce their footprint. However, the wider borough in this context, based on the Bayes figures, it's mainly the greening of the grid.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Fletcher, you want to come back?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I just want to pick up what Councillor Marshall and Councillor Roberts was actually talking about, and it was, I think I'm right in saying it was about private sector and private sector involvement in this issue. I've always thought that we can't get past this issue and we can't tackle climate change unless we engage the private sector. Something that I don't see, and maybe it forms part of the communication strategy, is involvement in the private sector. So if you could just come back on that, Chair. And just something that Councillor Marshall picked up on in terms of carbon offsetting. I think there is a tendency, and I'm not an expert in this, but from what I've read, there is a tendency to think of carbon offsetting as a silver bullet that will solve everything. And I think there are problems with going down the line of trying to offset. I think it's quite muddy in terms of how you calculate that. And I think, Kevin, you kind of alluded to that earlier. And I'd also just like to ask the Chair, obviously we've seen the Extension Rebellion protests last week I think it was. I'd just like to know if she actually agrees with that approach that's disrupted businesses, and surely a lot more healthy approach would be to get round the table and discuss it together rather than holding businesses to ransom.
I think I admire some of the things that Extinction Rebellion do, and I know people who are involved in it who are really nice, gentle, kind people. Maybe some of their approaches are upsetting to people. However, the reason they do this is because there's a failure to get round the table. They've waited all their lives for people to get round the table. So I think that's the way they go. Kevin.
Yes, Chair, thank you. So in terms of private sector involvement, you'll notice throughout the document we refer to engagement with businesses, with schools and with residents. So there is absolutely the intention to engage with businesses, and we've got our new comms and engagement officer that started with us, Jessica Marshall-Pierce. She started with us at the beginning of August, and one of her first tasks is to prepare the stakeholder mapping, and that will include all the businesses within the borough. So yes, we will be engaging with private sector. In terms of carbon offsetting, you're quite right. The science just is not very clear at the moment. So what the council is doing, we're taking what's called in the carbon trust terms, a location-based approach. And what that means is that at the moment, we are being transparent and displaying our entire carbon footprint. So as I mentioned to Councillor Marshall a few moments ago, that we're already purchasing green energy at 499 tonnes, but we are not counting that as being offset at the moment. We're counting that as part of our carbon footprint. So that's why we're still reporting 2,342 tonnes, a reduction of 45%, rather than what it could have been over 50% reduction if we'd have included the offsetting. The offsetting at the moment is called a market-based approach, but the council at the moment isn't taking that approach. We're taking the location-based approach and being entirely transparent. Hopefully that's clarified the position.
Yeah, no, if I can just come back to that, Chair. Yeah, it has. Thank you very much, Kevin. And I would urge that we carry on that approach.
I think Councillor Marshall wants to clarify something.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, there is a subtle difference between the way that Councillor Fletcher explained it and the way that I explained it. In terms of engaging it wasn't so much engaging the private and public and domestic sector to see if they have the solutions, they can be part of the solution, but it's explicitly about how, and Broxtowe as a constituency or as an geographic authority area, the domestic and private sector will far outweigh, of course, the carbon footprint of indeed us as an authority. We must take domestically people with us, and we must take the private sector with us in that, not necessarily seeking them for the solutions, because they may not either one be expert or two be willing. And it is the planning process specifically which allows us to do that into the future. I was also very, very clear that when it comes to offsetting, I specifically said that we shouldn't export our carbon footprint issue if it comes to offsetting, which Mr. Powell did say will never be fundamentally eliminated, which I agree with. Then the solution should be explicitly within Broxtowe as an authority geographic area, and we shouldn't export our footprint in that sense. And I think that's what is referred to as the geographic solution.
Thank you. Councillor Watts.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up upon Councillor Fletcher's comments about Extinction Rebellion. Young people have taken a tremendous lead in raising the issue of climate change. They have done what our generations have failed to do, which is to get the issue to the top of the agenda and keep it there. It is no good simply saying sit in the corner and wait to be asked. Sometimes people need to take a lead, and the young people are doing that through climate Extinction Rebellion through the school strike for climate change, and they are to be applauded. If sometimes that means that they have taken direct action that some of us wouldn't be comfortable with, then that might be a point of personal regret. But what I find is really disappointing has been the attempt by this government to demonise Extinction Rebellion and to cast them in the role of some sort of terrorists or master criminals. On the whole, they are young people very worried about their futures, very worried because we have no planet B. We were talking earlier about reports today that scientists have found signs that might suggest there is life on Venus. If it is, it will be a life very, very different to ours, because Venus has been the recipient of massive carbon builds up over many years, and as a result has become a real greenhouse planet. And that's what we don't want to see happen on Earth, because we've got nowhere else to go. Extinction Rebellion are promoting that concern, giving people a voice to that concern. Now, I've talked about young people, but actually I support the vast majority of what they do, and I'm 54, so I don't think I can claim the title of young person anymore. And to demonise them or suggest that they are criminals, and to imply that somehow negates all the good that they are doing, is the wrong approach, and it's the tired old politics that has got us into this mess in the first place. Thank you, Chair.
There was a 92-year-old, wasn't there, the other day, being treated not very kindly.
I said, well, that makes me feel young.
Yeah. Councillor Willimott.
Thank you, Chair. I compliment the people who put this document together. It's certainly a good, shall we say, basic record of the way the actions have been taken by the council over time, and it'll be a valuable resource for looking back into to clear various points as things develop. So I'm glad Kevin has made this point about carbon offsets in electricity. That was something that I was going to raise, and you've answered that question for me. Thank you very much. My main concern is that you've declared an emergency for the borough to be net carbon neutral by 2027. So that's a clear target. At the moment, our carbon footprint, ignoring what Kevin's told us about the electricity business, is 2,328 tonnes of CO2. And 97% of that comprises the gas that we burn, the fuel that we buy, diesel fuel, petrol, and electricity. It seems, looking back into this document, that we've picked the easy fruit in the past. We've got the compliments to the people who've done that, but it looks to be a lot more difficult going forward. Elsewhere in this document mentions, for instance, that the life of one of our refuse trucks is 12 years. Well, if we had a new one, its life is going way beyond 2027, and it's a diesel-powered truck. So what I would like to know, and I'm picking up on a word that Kevin mentioned, and I'd like him to elucidate on it, if he will. He talked about a carbon budget. Now, we've got a forecast going forward somehow. How are we going to get from where we are now to where we're supposed to be in 2027, and what the implications of that are, what the costs may be, and things like that. Now, I know that forecasting is an imprecise science. In my career, I have been involved in traffic forecasting, and we had to do what we called a high growth forecast if the economy was booming, a low growth forecast if the economy was quiet, And then that was going to make a decision on whether a piece of motorway was going to have 2 lanes in each direction, or 3 lanes in each direction, or even 4 lanes in each direction. And sometimes we got it wrong. Very badly wrong in 1 or 2 cases, which I won't mention. So I know that forecasting isn't easy, but you have to do it. Even if you do an optimistic forecast and a pessimistic forecast, I want to know how we're going to get from where we are now to where your target is taking us in 2027. And is any work being done on this? And I'm picking up on the words that Kevin used as carbon budget. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. So you're quite right. Some of the biggest headaches that we have are around our use of gas and fuel. The electricity, as I said earlier, we've already managed to buy from green sources. So we include it in our footprint, but we're already doing something toward offsetting our electricity if that can be used in the future, once the science and there's more clarity around how we can offset appropriately. So as I mentioned earlier as well, there'll be a point where we cannot reduce our carbon footprint any further, and at that point we've got to look at offsetting. The offsetting science around, for example, planting of trees and other mechanisms is unclear, and so we haven't even attempted at the moment to calculate the possibility. For example, if you look on the internet at the moment, an averagely mature tree, don't question me on what an averagely mature tree looks like, will sequester 22 kilograms of carbon dioxide per year. But then there is challenges around the management of woodland and all sorts of challenges about using that potential figure. So quite right, offsetting is an issue. Generating our own electricity through PV cells has its place, and we will be considering all of those things. There's also technologies changing. We're looking at hydrogen vehicles, we're looking at electric vehicles, and that will change the future. But you're quite right, some of the purchase that we make now will last into the future, and it may require us to either invest more by 2027 or indeed plan that extra few years of a life of a vehicle in terms of our offsetting arrangement, whatever they may be in the future. It's unclear what they will be at the moment. In terms of our carbon budget, again, you're quite right, Councillor Wilmot, it's something that we have to generate. As part of our carbon budget mechanism, we will be looking at scope 3, so that we include all of our carbon footprint, including everything to do with our supply chain and our procurements and our housing stock, so that we actually understand our carbon budget appropriately. And at that point, which will have to happen in the next few months, we will have an idea of how much carbon we can use up before we need to meet that target of 2027. So I haven't got an answer specifically for you. It's something that we'll be working on as part of our scope 3 analysis.
Don't forget the air source heat pumps. They're vital.
Absolutely, the air source heat pumps have a place to have a part to play in terms of our new builds, and you'll notice that our dementia-friendly bungalows and some of our other new builds have included that sort of technology.
Councillor Eastham.
Thank you, Chair. Bob stole my thunder much more eloquently than I could. I was going to say, where's the targets? I can't. I mean, I've gone through this quite considerably. I can't find any targets that you could really chart the way that we go. I keep hearing it's a living and breathing document, but we are sort of moving on to the 2027. I wondered where the 2027 target had come from, because usually at the council we tend to do the research first and then come up with a figure. But this time we've come up with a figure of 2027, and then we've made everything else appear to fit to it. That seems to be now tied to Extinction Rebellion, which is, from my point of view, is a bit of a concern. I think there's one or 2 points. I think one thing I've heard planning mentioned. I will just mention that you've cut down 4.5 acres of treeland in Kimberley since we've declared a climate emergency. So that's not a very good start on the planning. But what I am pleased about is the export of our carbon offsetting won't leave the borough. Now, I know you're spending £100,000 on looking at the tram, which I don't personally think will benefit the people of Kimberley, where it will go to. But it will have a massive, massive impact on the carbon footprint because of the concrete used. So, as you know, you put in hundreds of thousands of probably the most polluting, high footprint product to get the tram down in the time when you've got electric buses coming through. Left, right and centre, but you've chosen to spend another £100,000 looking at the tram. Now, I know what Kevin's going to tell me, because I can see him scribbling quickly. He's going to say that we can send it to central government. They'll pick it up. But that's not in the spirit of this, is it, Chair? That's not what we're doing here. What we're saying is there's a real problem. And if you just say, well, we can get away with our massive carbon footprint in Broxtowe that is phenomenal because of the tram, then we're not playing the game. If at the end of this, we've only saved another 5 or 6% that we've brought forward from what we've saved from the green electric that we've saved to add to it later on, we're not, and then we just buy all the offset, we're not playing the game. If you're serious, Chair, then I can't see where any extra funding is coming through. We've cut down some woodland and we're having a tram that's going to be a dead goose. Where's the targets? We need some targets on this so the people of the borough can follow through with this. This is a great document, and I will give dues to the people who have done all the work on it. It's fantastic. But if you're an outside person a lay person from the borough, most people, there's nothing in there to get you to get you engaged. There's a lot of what we need to do and blah blah blah, but we need engagement, and I think that's lacking. We do need some targets and some figures. But think about the tram, think about the concrete. Thank you very much, Chair.
Did you want to comment on that, Kevin?
I was going to say I can't comment on most of that, Councillor Eason. That's what was going to be my comment because, yeah, I've noted the points you've raised. Thank
you. So, Councillor Fletcher wants to clarify something very briefly, so we can move on to Mr. Summers' bit.
Yes, no, thank you very much, Chair. I will be brief. I just want to clarify something that Councillor Watt said, or maybe unintentionally inferred. I certainly do not demonise people who protest. I think it's a valid reason to protest. I think I am absolutely for tackling this. I think more should be done to tackle it, if I'm going to be honest. I think the governments are making a lot of progress towards it, but I do think you need to bring people on board. And I do not think what we've seen over this last 2 or 3 weeks by certain groups is in any way, shape or form really going towards that goal.
Okay, thank you.
So through you, Chair, we're ready now. If that's
yeah, Mr. Powell and Mr. Summers.
Thank you, Chair.
Over to Paul.
Are you okay? Are you okay to take over, Chair? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. What I've been asked to do, members, is to talk to you about two strands: Strand 02 and Strand 03. Strand 02 is the fuel strategy, and Strand 03 is the transport and fleet strategy. I've listened very carefully to the debate so far, and I think it's worth just making a point that 36% of the council's total emissions, or 831 tonnes of carbon, arise from our transport and fleet operations. Before I go any further, I would like to pay due comment that this report, the two strands that I've worked on, have been supported by the Transport and Fleet Manager, Mr. Wakefield. In giving you a very brief overview of where we are, what I've tried to do is to say that net zero, which is the balance between CO2 emitted and CO2 absorbed from the atmosphere, is where we're aiming towards, which is 2027. I take on board Councillor Wilmot's view that we make decisions today which will have, with transport and fleet and fuel, long-term effects. But what I would also draw members' attention to is that over the last period, which has been portrayed early on in the document, we have achieved some quite interesting results. So just to pick up on the fuel, we've improved fuel economy through rescheduling, and that's been very important. We've introduced IT into a number of different areas, in-cab technology, which enable us to communicate clearly and effectively with frontline staff. We've done a lot of vehicle monitoring in terms of controlling speed and braking, and these are practices that are commonplace within the transport bus industry. We make sure that we regularly maintain our vehicles. I'll give you one very bad example. Many of you will recall in Bath, where vehicle was run without maintenance, ended up with people being killed. And I think a key point with fuel is engine technology. If you look at engines today, the Euro 6 engines, the CO2 emissions from them are 50% less than what they were over 10 years ago. Moving very quickly to transport and fleet, we run 87 vehicles and approximately 200 items of plant. And these are key to delivering all of the services that our public, the residents of the borough, expect us to deliver. Yes, we have extended vehicle life, but that has been done in response to, first of all, the problems that we experienced with the 2008 financial crash. And it has had good and bad in a sense that it's taken operable vehicles and through midlife refurbishment extended their life. In addition to that, we've introduced further IT in terms of Chevy and FleetWave, which has enabled us to monitor the costs for each individual vehicle. And so we can identify very early on which vehicles are costing us a lot of money and which aren't. And then finally, to pick up the points there, we've introduced new technology. So we are moving towards electric vehicles. What again, picking up, I thought Councillor Wilmot's critique were very important. You can't really prejudge how fast technology will move, but I think that most of us are of an age to recognise that IT has come in within our own lifetime, and we're already starting to see a big increase in the use of electric vehicles. There are other aspects of technology that we need to think about. It's very clear that in the garden and in small tools, electric battery technology is now very popular. And again, it's something that we need to think about. And finally, in terms of future actions, and I've tried to keep it fairly brief because I do realise we're talking about a very large document. How we interact with our employees and with the wider public is very important. And the public expect us to have trained employees who are aware of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And that is a key part of what we're doing going forward. So it's a combination of where we are and where we're going to. And I'm quite happy to answer any questions on Strand 2 and Strand 3. Chair, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I don't see anybody wanting to question you in the chat. Is there anybody who's got a question for Mr. Summers? No. Thank you very much then.
Thank you.
Oh, hang on. Councillor Eason would like to.
You nearly got away with it, Paul.
Oh, nearly, Shane.
Nearly. I think, I mean, obviously we work together, so I know you've done a great, all of you done a great job with the fleet. I'm looking at page 61 of the document, and it's the fleet and plant capital investment.
Yes.
Now, my concern is that what's going to be expected for the 2027 target, which is sometimes where there's a problem, is that we will stretch out the vehicles to 2027 because it goes down quite considerably. Now, I would have thought in order to have got newer vehicles, electric vehicles, I thought I was under the impression that electric vehicles were very expensive or quite a lot more expensive. So I just want reassurance that we will have quite a heavily electric vehicle by then, which is what this council is after with the net zero, and that we will not just be stretching out the vehicles that we have now with maintenance, etc., so that in 2027 we suddenly find we've got a lot of freight liners that are coughing and spluttering down the road, and we find that we need to spend a lot more money on it. So my concern is, have you been given the resources and the money to allow you to convert to an electric fleet? And well, I think that's mainly my point, is that have we got the money to convert to electric?
I thank you, Councillor Eason, and through you, Chair. In response, you're very aware through your own occupation, I know, that heavy haulage is heavily reliant on diesel for its traction, but clearly within Nottingham City at the moment they are running 2 electric freighters. I would defer to my colleague here, Mr. Wakefield, but he will advise on the cost of those and the practicality of it, and the point that you're making that we're not just extending the fleet with the hope that we're going to have electric vehicles. Mr. Wakefield, could you comment on that?
I will. Thank you, Paul. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, through you, Chair. Yeah, you're exactly right. The budget doesn't go up a fantastic amount, and one of the reasons is because at the moment it's fairly unknown what the cost of those vehicles are going to be. The refuse vehicles that Paul spoke about, an average vehicle for us to buy at the moment is about 185,000. The electric vehicles, which Not City have just purchased, are 360,000 each, so it's double the cost. We did some calculation on that, and the payback on those vehicles on fuel alone would have to be over a 10-year period. That's not taking into account any infrastructure that would be required into the depot for the electricity to come in. Not City had to put a substation within their depot and spend tens of thousands of pounds bringing extra electricity in to be able to charge their actual vehicles up. So we are looking where it's financially viable. We've currently got 2 small electric vans. Just give you an idea again on the van sizes, the 1-ton transit vans, we currently get those for around about 18,500. We had the other week electric vehicle of a size, and that was 60,000. Now the payback on that, because we don't do a lot of mileage, we do very little mileage on vans, it's an average about 5,000 miles per year. So the payback on the fuel would be 15 years plus. So wherever we can financially look to purchase vehicles that are going to be sustainable, then that's the way we'll go. At the moment, I think Paul alluded to that and Kevin a little bit earlier regarding hydrogen vehicles. I think personally, as a transport manager, that is the way that things will go. I think at the moment, these electric vehicles, they're only just out. They've not proved their worth, and I think at some point there will be hydrogen vehicles which will be more prevalent than the electric vehicles.
Thank you. Councillor Hallam.
Thank you, Chair. This is the part of tackling the climate emergency that I find the most interesting, actually, is when is it the right time to look at investment in new technology? And we're not just talking about plant and vehicles here. You're talking about IT equipment as well. The computer that's sitting down here somewhere at the moment is about 100 times more powerful than one I had in the late 90s, and yet it runs on half of the kilowatts. And so being able to strategize when is the right time to replace old kit in order to take advantage of the innovations and the efficiencies that are being built into everything from consumer appliances to vehicles. There is an expectation now when we buy something new that it's more efficient than its predecessor, and I take on board the comments that have been raised. And I'm really keen to work with everybody on the council to try and make sure that we do have an investment in new technology, that we do pick the right times to be able to buy new. Because if we continue to spin out old stuff, then we will never achieve the 2027 target unless we do an awful lot of offsetting. I don't know that we necessarily have the space for that. So it's hugely important, and I'm very keen to work across all parties and committees to see what we can do on this. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I just quickly respond to that, Chair? I very much take on board the point that Councillor Hallam's making, and I think the key point that's been made across all parties here is that the strategy is important because it's making us consider what decisions we're making and taking and how we're actually delivering our service over the coming years. I think the point that Councillor Hallam's just made is very, 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 very correct. We're not that good necessarily at making decisions in terms of how we adopt the technology, but we know we've got which direction we need to go in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Lally. Pat.
Thank you, Chair. I think one of the officers made the point that electric vehicles they're not really suitable for heavy vehicles. It seems to be almost accepted within the technology sector at the minute, and that hydrogen vehicles are being developed, and this may be a better way forward. But I think this sort of ties into my question that I asked too early a little while ago, that we need to be reducing the mileage we're doing by reducing the amount of waste that we're producing, and as Paul Summer alludes to, being more efficient in where we go and how often we go.
Thank you. Councillor Eason.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, this is where I find it a little bit disingenuous, because I absolutely agree with what Paul Summers has said about the fleet, and I understand what he's saying about the fleet, and I agree with him that technology isn't now the right time to go ahead with that. But I will go back to the fact that you've said as a council you're going to be carbon neutral by 2027. And that's why I don't understand the way around you've done this, that why you didn't speak to all your officers that you've got and look at the feasibility of this, because the fleet isn't going to be carbon neutral by 2027. I doubt if you'll have any electric Freightliner, so your carbon footprint isn't going to be massively different for that. And if that's the case for that, then is this going to be the same for all the other 15 strands? And that's my concern, is that you for political expedience, you've come up with 2027. And don't get me wrong, everybody knows there's a major problem. We can see it outside the door, but I just feel that just to get the upper hand with this date, or whether it's because you want to nail your flag to the mast of Extinction Rebellion, I'm not quite sure which, you know, this isn't adding up for me, and I don't think it'll add up for the wider community if we don't have some commitment from Broxtowe to throw some money at some of these things. Because where's the money? Paul Summers is having to make difficult, and Fleet Manager having to make decisions based on budgets. He may need, if you'd have come to me and said, we're going to give him we're going to give him double the amount of money, I can see the commitment. But actually the budget's going down. It's gone down. It's not gone up. It's gone down, the budget, as it appears. That's not a commitment to pull this climate change back in order. All that seems to me is we're going to drag the lorries out that little bit longer so it looks better. So I think there needs to be a commitment from this council to give the fleet the ability to invest where they need to in newer and more modern tech. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Watts, I think. Am I doing it right?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I was going to pick up on the point about electric vehicles, because that's something I'm very, very interested in. But I just want to firstly respond to what Councillor Eason has just said. There's a lot of words I might use, but most of them would get me in trouble for using that sort of language. It is absolutely hypocritical for the party which has consistently over the last 10 years starved local authorities of the funding that we need to do our job properly to then complain about a lack of funding. It is their government which is responsible for the fact that local authorities do not have the money that we need to do the job properly. And I am afraid I'm going to take no lectures from any Conservative about a lack of resources. Having said that, I now want to just turn to electric vehicles. We have at least 2 councillors now who have electric vehicles, myself and Councillor Land. The technology for electric cars is moving forward at a pace, and certainly over the last 12 months, the range on electric vehicles and the cost of them have increased in terms of range and decreased in terms of cost quite considerably. I think one of the good illustrations is actually the Nissan Leaf, which was one of the first electric vehicles, bless you, it was one of the first electric vehicles, electric cars that was popular. And the initial Leaf had a range of about 100 miles, and that's now approximately double. My car in urban traffic can easily get 300 miles on a charge, and so the ranges are far better than they were. And at the same time, as I say, costs are coming down significantly. So the cost of the Kia Niro, which I bought, is only a couple of £1,000 more than the hybrid version, which is the least green version of that particular car that Kia make. So there will be, and I think we are very rapidly approaching for cars and for light vans, a tipping point where it really does become worthwhile to invest in the extra technology, in the green technology. What we need to do, though, to make sure that we reach that tipping point, is to make sure that the public have facilities to charge their vehicles up. Today, I've been working in Grimsby. I can charge my car up at my house. I then drive to Grimsby, where I can park in a public car park where there is a free charging point, or several free charging points that I can then charge the vehicle up to come back again. And that makes life so easy for an electric driver. And so the more of that we can provide, the quicker we will reach the tipping point. And I do think we are very, very nearly there. And there will very soon be a time when the vast majority of new cars will be electric. Thank you very much. I should just say that that's for light vehicles. Heavy vehicles, of course, it's a different issue, and we all do recognise that, and hydrogen may well be a much better solution there. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Willimott.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to follow on from what Paul was telling us about the transport side. For those of us that are interested in this subject, me being one, I'm sure I'm not the only one, and bearing in mind that this is a very big component of our carbon footprint, 831 tonnes out of the 2,328, can we have some figures from the council on what comprises the fleet and its anticipated life, so we can see the sort of problem that's got to be solved one way or another. Make it very useful to try and get my head around what we're facing in forecasting and looking ahead as to how we're going to meet this ambitious target of net carbon zero by 2027. Is that possible, please?
Through you, Chair, if Councillor Wilmot looks at page 56 of the Transport and Fleet Strategy, there is a pie chart which shows the breakdown of the fleet, and at the bottom on the right is the fleet emissions hierarchy. But I can do what Councillor Wilmot's asked for. The problem with writing these reports is what to leave out, what to put in, and I take that very much what he said. In terms of specific detail, in terms of CO2, yes, we can do that, and a lot of the question that Councillor Wilmot's asked has been provided on page 56. I can add further to that in future and can come back on that.
Thank you. Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. As I predicted to some before this meeting, the difficulty that some councillors will have with this meeting tonight is demonstrably supporting what is good, this excellent strategy, coupled with the confliction around those not having done it before. So I predicted, of course, that this will turn into some individuals criticising the detail, criticising the lack of target, criticising some of the very, very specific issues of the strategy itself. And of course, it's a well-known tactic, that is, of then deflecting from the ambition, deflecting from the opportunity, and deflecting from the ability to work hard towards the target that we have in 2027. And of course, that prediction has come true from some of the contributions we've heard. The good news is that we have, as an authority, in effect, a third-party assurer in the Carbon Trust to try and help us with the journey that we're on. We have diligent officers who clearly understand the importance of this strategy and the ambition of it to this administration. But crucially, as Councillor Watts pointed out, we have to kind of point out the hypocrisy where it is prevalent. And that is, of course, that Broxtowe, under the last 10 years of a national Conservative government, has often been at the bottom of all local government finance handout of any tier, of any authority in the country. This, of course, prevents us doing everything we would like to do and reaching all the ambition we want to do around either housing or business strategy or indeed climate strategy as itself. The other bit of good news is of course, you've seen the Prime Minister, of course, given the opportunity to stand and reject notions in the House of Commons today was eviscerated by Ed Miliband in the opposition. Here is an opportunity for Councillor Esom, Councillor Willamot and Councillor Fletcher to absolutely stand with this administration in condemning the local government finances, specifically to Broxtowe, demanding that the local government funding formula is increased so that we can do and meet what is clearly a national crisis in the environment and in climate. And we have the opportunity right now for Councillor Esom, Councillor Willamot and indeed Councillor Fletcher to say that the previous funding settlements have been an absolute disgrace to this authority under the Conservative national government. They reject them in their entirety and they will join with the Labour Party and with the Liberal Democrats in this administration in demanding a fairer settlement for Broxtowe. I suspect we might get some tumbleweed.
Okay. Councillor Fletcher, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I mean, far from tumbleweed, I really don't understand why an issue of environment and climate change has now developed into an issue of local government finance.
Because you brought up funding.
Hang on, I'm talking, please. In terms of deflection and pessimism, it's called scrutinising. And that's exactly what you did for the last 5 years in local government when we decided to rationalise the estate, which has led to the carbon reduction. So it's called being a good councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, it's disappointing, really. We've said from the very beginning of this debate, an hour and a half ago now, that we were more than happy to support the paper, which we are. If I was being cynical, I'd suggest there are certain people who are trying to antagonise my group to stop us from supporting it, which is the last thing we're going to do. And so I'll say again, we will support this. Rather than grandstanding about local government finance, I've been to meet ministers, I've been to government, and I've asked for more cash for Broxtowe. I did it when I was leader of the council. I've done it since, and I did it before, and I won't stop fighting for the best for us. But you know, we're here to talk about the paper that's in front of us. We've done nothing but support it. We've supported it as well by saying that it could be a little bit more ambitious, and we'll continue to do that. But on the whole, we support it. We're happy to support it, and I think, quite honestly, we really ought to go to the vote now before this descends into some sort of silly party political broadcast, and it starts to lose the kind of universal support that it deserves.
Thank you. Councillor Esom.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with Richard. I think just to come back to what Greg said, it's just a little bit concerning that you were in control. You did know what your budgets were. So it's a little bit rich now to start blaming and saying you can't do the things that we're asking you to do when you knew what your personal budgets were. So if you were basing that on poor financial advice, then you know that's your issue. Thank you.
That's so. I think that's a bit rich, actually. However, Councillor Lally.
Why are the opposition? They seem to be throw money at everything. Is that the way forward all the time? I don't think so. You've got to work smarter and you've got to work cleverer, not just chuck money at everything. That's an easy way out.
Okay, thank you. So I think we've concluded that section now. Shall we move on to the next section, which is the energy and building infrastructure, and that starts on page 66. Do we have anybody who wants to talk about that, to present that, or shall we just whip straight through?
We were just asking for questions, Chair.
Yeah, just any questions
on any of the other strands?
Right, well, okay then. Any questions on employee business mileage? No, any questions?
Councillor McRae is asked to speak, Chair.
Oh, Councillor McRae.
Sorry, I couldn't get everything to turn on. Yeah, thank you for sending this document. Firstly, it's I do enjoy reading things like this, and well done putting it together. I just wanted to ask a quick question on the water courses, which start on page 76, and it does say that there are 6 brooks that the borough is responsible for maintaining. Obviously, if that's all that we do maintain, that is all that we do maintain. But it would be interesting to know, and I have asked this before in different meetings and that, and I'm still waiting to find out what's going on. There's a brook that runs, I don't think it's Boundary Brook, but it joins up to Boundary Brook, which is the boundary between Stapleford and Trow, and it goes along the back of, I've just wrote it down, that's why I'm looking down. It goes along the side of Hartwood Drive, underneath Moorbridge Lane, then all the way through to Mill Road in Stapleford. And it would be interesting to know who runs that, because you know, a few weeks ago, it was cleared along Hartwood Drive from Brownsy Brook, so Stapleford up to Moorbridge Lane. But at the minute, underneath Moorbridge Lane, it seems to be blocked. And then all the way through Moorbridge towards Mill Road, I keep getting told different people own it and it belongs to different councils and this, that and the other. I got a phone call from the county council. They said they'd been out and had a look, which I appreciate. Councillor Carr helped me with that one. And they said basically it's not theirs. So it'd be interesting to find out. It's not in here, and perhaps I don't know if this is the right place to ask, but it does say water courses. If we can find out whose it is, because it does need clearing out, it does need cleaning, and that would help with some of the flooding issues. I'm sure it would, that have been happening in Trow and other local areas. You know, mainly because we keep building on Greenbelt and that. So if we're going to do, if these things are happening, we need to be cleaning these brooks and dikes out, or whatever you call them these days. If anyone can find out who's responsible for that, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
You look like you're ready to speak, Kevin.
Yeah, well, through you, Chair. I don't know whether Tim's on the call, but I've got, if you look at page 29 and action 4, that's on the water courses strategic actions. It says undertake a detailed assessment of the brooks that the council is responsible for to carry out a flood risk assessment. So that arrangement is going to be undertaken between summer of 2020 and summer 2021. So we'll be looking at all the brooks in the borough. We'll be doing the flood risk assessment. We'll be understanding who owns what portion, and we'll be working with the owners to ensure that the relevant areas are maintained. So that is something that we've noted. It's something that the leader has raised with us during the recent flooding that we experienced earlier in the year. So it's definitely on the list. And I think Tim's...
Yeah, just to come in there, Chair, yes. We did actually meet with the County Council's flood officer actually on the site after the clearance work had been undertaken. It was clearance work that the County Council had requested on that particular section of brook, and it was done by the landowner who backs onto that section of brook. We did identify the sort of blockage that's actually underneath Moorbridge Lane, and again we'll be working with the County Council. It's their responsibility to sort that out, and then we'll be working sort of further downstream. But what the County Council did say is that the sort of link between the boundary brook and the particular brook that you're referring to, that hasn't been breached. So if there is an increase in rainfall and water coming down that, it shouldn't go into the particular brook that you're referring to. So yes, we are aware of it, and we're working with the County Council on it.
So John Delaney, did you want to add to that point?
Yes.
Yes, thank you, thank you, Chair. Hopefully, I'm not muted. Yes, I think Tim's explained it. It's very complicated, as is in most cases with land drainage. So it's called the riparian owners. It's the people that own the land either side. So on one side of that brook, it's a farmer. On the other side, it's a whole variety of private landowners, including in some cases the council, our council itself. Most watercourses are not the responsibility of the council. They are the responsibility of the landowners either side, which in some cases can be numerous individual private householders as well as large established landowners. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Watts.
Yeah, thank you. In fact, Councillor McRae had jumped over the one that I wanted to pick up on, which was the employee and business mileage strand, which is the one before.
Yeah, that's okay.
So if we can just go back to that for a moment, there's 2 points I wanted to touch on. The first is that the number of commuting miles in cars stood at 14,294 per week. Now, there aren't many pluses that come out of COVID-19, but one of them has certainly been the impact on the environment, that it's given it a great chance to recover. And by us moving much more to working at home, that figure, I'm confident, is going to come down tremendously. And I just wondered whether Kevin had any estimate, I'm not asking for a precise figure, but any estimate of the amount that is likely to come down as a percentage. And the other point, just to raise as a very positive, is that the mileage that we pay for travel by electric vehicles is the same as we pay by petrol and diesel vehicles. And I think that's a very good financial incentive to people who may be paying a bit extra for their car, but then have much lower running costs. And so that balances out nicely and doesn't penalise them for having a more efficient car. So thank you very much. I wonder if Kevin could pick up on that.
Yep, through you, Chair. So 14,294 miles, that's actually just for 263 employees that responded to our survey. So given that there's 478 employees, we need to do a more thorough survey and ensure that we get all employees to respond, because I'm sure that that figure per week will naturally grow. So that is the number of miles per week that we've saved because employees have worked from home. Now, working from home is not a panacea, certainly isn't. We did a survey and 59% of our staff said they enjoyed working from home, but that meant that 41% of staff either found it difficult because of home circumstances, homeschooling and other personal issues, or they just felt that they were isolated. And for those, we've actually made arrangements for them to come back in to the office. But for many of us, we've enjoyed the working from home experience, and it's ensured that we are making this sort of saving in terms of commuting miles. Moving forward, we've got to carefully analyse what we do next. Will encourage staff who are able and willing to continue to work from home where that's possible and where there's no impact on service delivery or productivity. But where that's possible, then we will be encouraging working from home, and that's picked up more thoroughly in the technology strand 13.
You know it so well. Thank you.
So thank you for that.
So we're just moving on through to questions now. So I think any questions on meadow planting and wildlife corridors? Any on tree planting? That's strand 8. Recycling, strand 9.
Can I just say something about the planting of corridors?
Yeah.
Lydia Ball.
Yes, Lydia.
I've lost my pages because the book's dropped on the floor. But I'd like to say the grass verges and the island under the A610 with the wildflowers is absolutely beautiful. And I'd like to say thank you for carrying it on, because I know we've been doing it for a few years, and I'm pleased to say that you're obviously doing it, carrying it forward. And I suggest that you do a lot more on the grass verges through the borough, because it's things like that, I'm sure, that make the general public more aware of what we are trying to do. And I'm sure that it might stop them from throwing litter out of cars, etc. and all that sort of thing, because I'm very passionate about that. But it's great to see it. I hope you all come through Orsworth and have a look. It's brilliant. Thank you.
That's lovely. Some of us have got our own. We've got our own flowers, and people are absolutely delighted by them. But I think there's still this idea amongst the public that you just don't do any mowing and then the flowers grow. Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's on tree planting again, and it just kind of, when you read it, sort of suggests that a tree is a tree, which isn't the case. There are trees which are good, particularly, there are fast-growing trees, slow-growing trees, the trees that probably take more carbon out of the atmosphere than other trees. I don't know which is which, but I think we need to define what we're actually looking at and start looking at planting trees which probably, there are trees which have a very good impact on local air quality. There are some which actually worsen local air quality as well. So can we just have a bit more detail at some point in the future about what actually we think constitutes a good tree and a bad tree, please?
I think we did hear a bit about that when somebody gave a presentation about along the edge of the road to mitigate against the pollution from the traffic, and the broadleaf trees were good, but then they needed cleaning.
Yeah.
So
we did. You're right, and I think it needs to be in the strategy, doesn't it?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ali.
Just talking about trees, I mean, I welcome tree planting. It's a positive way forward and a reasonable cost. However, are we being careful with these things at times? 15 years ago, I was involved with tree planting just down the road from where I live. We now have a 40-foot monster in the middle of a residential area. And I can't imagine who made the choice that we would plant such a tree. So are we so cognizant of these things when we do them?
I think we're probably more skilled than we used to be. Certainly, the staff, the officers here are very, very highly skilled people, and perhaps they weren't so in the past. Do you want to come in on that, Kevin?
I can't really comment on that particular example. I don't know whether Tim's able to comment.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not aware of the particular tree that Councillor Ali is referring to, but no, if we are planting trees, then we make sure we choose the right species for the right location, and we have to be mindful of how big a tree will grow in size, the impact that the roots may have. So yeah, it's all about getting the right tree for the right place.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on then, any questions on Strand 9, recycling? Strand 10, housing delivery?
Please, Chair. I sort of asked a question a long while ago about recycling. Does it fall in now, or is it more in another
No, Strand 9 is the one. I paused for you, but you have to jump in quickly because I'm trying to move on.
So well, can I re-ask the question?
Yes, yes.
Do we have to look towards sort of national moves to reduce packaging, or is there ways of actually increasing our recycling? And as I say, we've hit a plateau for many years, and is there no answer to this? We just need to, we'll always be recycling 50%, but we need to recycle 50% of a less amount.
We have got an answer, haven't we, Kevin? We've got somebody employed, haven't we?
Yes, we've got a number of people employed, but before I answer, is Paul on the call, Paul Wolverson?
Yes, I'm here, Kevin.
Hello, Paul. Do you want to comment on that before I have a go?
Absolutely, yes, through you, Chair. I think to answer the question, Councillor, I think there's two aspects to it, really. One, you're right, there's a national drive that will come through the Environment Bill and the Waste Strategy, and I think that will have a fundamental effect on what we're trying to achieve. But most recently, I think with members approving the acquisition and appointment of a new post with regards to recycling, I think that will have a more fundamental approach and a more rapid approach as to how we as a council promote recycling and how we increase that recycling rate from a stagnation point of view to an increasing point of view, which is what we're all driving for. So that's the way forward as I see it at this moment in time.
Thank you. Moving on then, where are we? Housing delivery and housing improvements. Technology then. Somebody said they wanted to talk on technology, I believe. Strand 13.
Councillor, I think you've missed core strategy and planning.
Have I?
Strand 12.
Oh, yeah, number 12. Any comments or questions on Strand 12, core strategy and planning? Councillor Marshall?
Only, look, for the purposes of expediting the meeting, look, no more than was said earlier. My own view is I think that this section, despite it being at 12, is one of the most, for the points that Councillor Fletcher touched on, engaging things outside of our direct control in the domestic and private sectors. It is this element of the Strand which we should try and put a significant amount of resource and influence into setting standards for future builds in Broxtowe.
Thank you. Okay, and technology. And then on to air quality. Air quality. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just on air quality, I think it should be the report that we're going to move on to, the noting report, the air quality report, should be welcomed. I think it's great, and I commend the council and the officers with what they've done with that report. Just want to know from the Chair and Kevin, do we have any signs in terms of the Environment Bill and how that may affect our approach to air quality, in particular the legally binding targets I think that will bring in?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I think we've got David Gell on the call, and he's our air quality expert. David, are you able to comment on that?
Through you, Chair, I'm an expert, probably too grand a title for me on air quality, but thank you, Kevin, anyway. In terms of experts, we have got Kate Ratcliffe, who certainly is a lot more expert on air quality issues. I'm not sure that Kate is aware of the targets, but certainly she's on the call if she does know anything about them, Chair.
Hello.
Hello, Kate.
Hello. No, not as of yet. We haven't had any sort of definite figures that have been released. So we know a few sort of things that they're bringing in, but nothing with regards to that's been decided on air quality.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Strand 15, hospitality and support services.
Councillor Jackson has asked to speak, Chair.
All right, go on then, Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, thank you. It's on air quality. So two things. Cycle to work scheme. Appreciate that we're going to take part in this scheme, which gives tax breaks to people to buy bicycles. But I don't think it's the cost or the tax implications that are stopping people from cycling to work. So we need to, and I know we do in some sites, so we need to make sure we're providing, first of all, secure storage for these bicycles when people do ride to work, and then secondly, showering or changing facilities for them when they ride to work. And I know that exists in the town hall building, but I don't think it's everywhere. So if we want people to do that, that's something we're going to need to do. On low emission vehicles, completely appreciate that we're talking about having purchased these two electric vans. I think we just need to do an exercise on each time we do this, because we talked earlier about the technology moving on. And I'm all for doing it if it makes sense, but it might make sense because, you know, if an electric van is twice the cost of a diesel van, it might make a lot of sense to offset that those CO2 emissions from a diesel van, whether it's locally or globally, because we could probably offset, you know, if a van is twice as expensive to buy as an electric van than a diesel, we could probably offset 10 times over the emissions from a diesel van. So I would like to think until electric vans get down to a price that's somewhere similar, that we're at least doing an exercise to work out how much emissions we could actually offset by buying a diesel one or a petrol one or whatever, and offsetting the difference.
Yeah, through you, Chair, that all of those things would have to be taken into consideration. Yeah.
Thank you. So hospitality and support, I have to say on this one, I still take issue with the thing that takes pods, because we have to take somebody very kindly takes them away to be recycled elsewhere. I mean, there's an irony in that, if ever there was. I mean, a jar with a spoon would do us fine just for our meetings if we ever get them again.
Again, through you, Chair, we've ensured that there are facilities, as you've mentioned, available in each of the members' rooms and the council meeting rooms. So it is jars of coffee and tea bags.
Ooh, tea bags. Ooh, I hope they're non-plastic tea bags.
I don't know whether they are.
Right, and so when we've got to, that's the 15 strands.
So it's over to the recommendation, Chair.
Yeah, pardon?
It's over to the recommendation.
It is. So I didn't know if we got to talk about the appendices or anything, because I do seem to remember that Councillor Watts wanted something else included as an appendix, but maybe I'm wrong.
I've made a suggestion, but it's not been included. I'm not going to throw up my hands about it now.
It still can be.
My suggestion was just that the Zero Carbon Broxtowe programme, which we circulated last year, which underpins a lot of the discussions that the Ruling Alliance has had on this, should be attached as an appendix as well.
Okay, we'll consider that. Right then, so now what we need to do, we have to note the whole document, which I'm sure we've noted it, at great length, and we have two votes. The first is to vote in favour of the climate change strategy. So Lisa, would you take us through the vote in favour or against that?
Okay, Councillor Ball.
For.
Councillor Darby.
For.
Councillor Easom.
For.
Councillor Fletcher.
For.
Councillor Hallam.
For.
Councillor Jackson.
For.
Councillor Lally.
For.
Councillor McRae.
For.
Councillor Marshall.
For.
Councillor Roberts Thompson.
For.
Councillor Skinner.
For. Before that, I should have asked for a seconder.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Can you do a retrospective seconding? Right, so that one's carried. The other vote.
Oh, I've still got two more. Councillor Watts.
For.
Councillor Willamot.
For.
That's carried, Chair.
Thank you very much. So the next one is I propose that we approve the transport strategy. Do I have a second? Thank you. So can we have a vote on that as well?
Okay, Councillor Ball.
For.
Councillor Darby.
For.
Councillor Easom.
For.
Councillor Fletcher.
For.
Councillor Hallam.
For.
Councillor Jackson.
For.
Councillor Lally.
For.
Councillor McRae.
For.
Councillor Marshall.
For.
Councillor Roberts Thompson.
For.
Councillor Skinner.
For.
Councillor Watts.
For.
And Councillor Willamot.
For.
That's carried, Chair.
Thank you. So now moving on to the next item is about the clean and green bulky waste collection, I believe, item 5, pages 7 to 10. Now we didn't have much of that while the COVID was going on, so I think the recommendation is that we use the money for clean and green budget to reduce the waiting times of bulky waste collections in the future. So we have to vote on that one. So do I have a seconder for a vote on that?
Seconded.
Right. Is there any comment on this, or shall we go straight to the vote? Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I broadly agree with moving resources where we need them. Can I just confirm, though, will this affect any other part of the Clean and Green initiative? I'm just concerned that it's quite a broad approach, so I just want to make sure it doesn't affect any other areas. Thank you.
Paul's available for this one, Chair.
Yes, through you, Chair. No, Councillor Fletcher, that won't adversely affect any other strand of the Clean and Green project.
Okay. Councillor Lally.
I think a 6-week lead time was totally unacceptable. We should never have got to a 6-week lead time.
Okay, take that on board. Councillor McRae.
Yeah, hi there. I'm just going to say I'm glad to see that it looks like hopefully if we're allowed, there's going to be some of them bulky waste days coming up in the future, which I love doing them. So I'm looking forward to that. And then I'm sure the other councillors will join me. And can we pass on our thanks to all the cleaning staff, because they're all out there on the streets, and I don't think they've stopped actually litter picking, collecting up bulky waste. They've been out in the vans from first thing in the morning till late thing. I think they're doing a cracking job, and I just think, you know, I would like to thank them, and I'm sure others would agree with me on that one. So yeah, please pass that on to them. Thank you.
Thank you. We will.
Okay, so can we take that to the vote then? I've had a seconder, haven't I?
Yep, you have. Councillor Ball.
4.
Councillor Darby.
4.
Councillor Eastham.
4.
Councillor Fletcher.
4.
Councillor Hallam.
4.
Councillor Jackson.
4.
Councillor Lally.
4.
Councillor McRae.
4.
Councillor Marshall.
4.
Councillor Roberts Thompson.
4.
Councillor Skinner.
4.
Councillor Watts.
4.
Councillor Willimott.
4.
That's carried, Chair.
Thank you. So the next item is about recycling again. So we have actually talked about, you know, problems with trying to increase our recycling rates, and I have looked at the it refers to the government programme here, the Our Waste, Our Resources, and it sounds very good, but it's on a 25-year cycle, and that's just too long. So the recommendation here is to vote on actually changing what we do. So it's suggested that we should stop collecting textiles. Textiles has been a difficult one because it's been a bit hit and miss, and we don't actually collect that many textiles. So we have two options here. Either we try and promote textile collections and contact people and try and get them to do it, or we could actually just agree that the increased capacity for extra glass would be much more useful and allow people to give their textiles and all their waste clothes and rags to the many charities that are very grateful for them. So did anybody want to say anything about this? Any officers or anybody? Can't hear you.
You're on mute, Kevin.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Vice Chair. Yeah, Paul has written this report and will comment on it.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, through you, Chair. Yes, I won't touch on the elements of the report that we've already discussed regarding the ways to improve through the waste strategy and the officer, unless members particularly want to. With regards to the textiles, yes, as I'm sure members are aware, the tonnage that we are picking up across all streams is rose significantly, particularly with glass, which has gone up by 44%, which in itself poses a problem for us from a collection point of view. Hence, we've had to change the vehicle and currently suspend the textile service. As you've alluded to, Chair, historically that is low performing from a collection point of view, but by association, operationally that still causes difficulties in terms of having to actually walk the streets and look for potential properties that have a textile out for us for a collection. So the proposal is to look to change that service, either by a cessation of that service and allowing the charities to fulfil that element of the council's function, or produce a bookable system and removing the need and the requirement of the glass collection to actually undertake that collection, which by association will then allow us to change the vehicle, which will allow us to collect more glass on that particular vehicle with associated scope 1 reductions and the like. So there's a lot of positives in actually changing the system to what we have. So the background to it is that. I'm happy to answer any questions that members may have.
So Councillor Roberts Thompson, did I miss you out, or was this what you wanted to talk about?
No, Chair.
We've got Councillor Jackson and Councillor Fletcher first, actually.
Have I? Can I let Trish get on though?
I'm happy to wait my turn.
Are you? All right then, Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, thank you. It's just the general principle, really. I mean, I see what you're trying to do in this report and support it, but we shouldn't be looking at it as increasing recycling. It should be reducing the amount that's going to residual waste collection and is going to landfill or incineration, really. Because, you know, there's far too much. We all know this. It should be reduced first of all, then reuse, then recycle. There's far too much superfluous packaging around, and if we can get suppliers to start reducing that sort of thing, it might actually look like we're doing worse because our recycling rates might go down, but actually we're all better off because of it. So just really just it's a point of note for future reference that we ought to be looking at it in that way round to start with. Recycling rates aren't everything. Having said all that, I can see what you're trying to do with the report and support you.
Thank you. You don't need so much when you wear your pyjamas all day anyway, do you? Now then, where are we? Can you just remind me who I've missed out and whose turn it is to speak?
It's Councillor Fletcher next.
Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, my position is, like Councillor Jackson said, completely understand what you're trying to get at here. My personal preference is that we go with option 1. I think it's a happy medium. I don't think we want to get into the business of telling residents that, you know, the services are going to be cut. However, what I will say that is that I think we should caveat that with more of a lead to drive the awareness of this. I can see in 2016 to 2017 there was 9 tonnes and that went down. So just want to know if there's any indication of why that went down so much. But I do urge all members to support option 1. I think it's the sensible option out of the 2. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Robert Thompson.
What? Oh, Councillor Roberts Thompson. Sorry, you didn't get your go, did you?
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of comments, particularly on the communication and education first. There's nothing in this. I quite agree with having a communication and education officer, but just how much do you think that they can increase this wonderful target of 15% that we're missing to get us over the 50% to recycling? Because that's a big ask. Okay, we may need a communication and education officer, but it's very difficult. That's to put a lot of expectation on this person that this would sort of all of a sudden change our recycling rates. So that's my first question. My second is about the textiles. I'm not sure, there's been a few comments that, oh, the charities will take them. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware in Beeston at the moment, you have to book to leave deposits of belongings and things with charities. You have to book them for now. The booking rate is about 3 weeks, and you're allowed to arrive with 3 bags. So that actually charities are up to here with with people's belongings. The last thing we want now is to eliminate our textile collection. But because in fact, people can't get rid of them through most of the charities, certainly in the Beeston here at the moment, because the demand is just too great. So my favour is option 1, because I think we do need this, but I think it really needs much more publicity, that actually we can put unwanted clothes, duvets and pillows and things on the street, and the council will pick them up, because in addition to that, it's very difficult to take them to the waste recycling centre. That requires a long wait at the moment. So, there's a lot of associated issues, but charities at the moment in Beeston are just full up. So that if we eliminate this, then we're likely to see it being dumped in our recycling bins or black bins. And when we went to Mansfield to the waste recycling centre there, I mean, the last thing they want is, a feather duvet sort of blowing all over a recycling centre because it hasn't been disposed of correctly. And my last comment really is about the just sort of hidden on page 16, weekly food waste collections looks like they're coming in a couple of years. That will be a big change again and so we need to factor that into our consideration. Thanks.
Thank you. Does anybody want to talk about the duvets?
Hello, through you, Chair. Yes, I'm happy to answer Councillor's questions. First, Councillor Fletcher, in terms of sort of why is it never been overly successful in terms of the tonnage. I guess there's a few reasons for that. I would suggest one is that there are other avenues in terms of charities historically. A lot of places now do a pay by weight for textiles, so residents actually have a avenue to sell them. And conversely, there's a lot of clothes now which are sold through market-based internet. I'm sure you know the people I'm talking about in terms of eBay and the likes of that, and Gumtree, where people can, other avenues where people can derive an income from their textiles. So that's one of the reasons I believe, or a few of the reasons I believe, historically there's been a low participation in that. With regards to councillors' requests regarding the effect of this one particular person that we're going to employ, I think that yes, it's going to be very, very difficult to actually ask them to achieve that 50% on their own. I think it's about building the momentum as we move towards the waste resource and strategy being actually implemented, and the outcomes of that around the 2023. It's about building that momentum between now and then. There is 15% in that black bin that in theory is recyclable. Like I say, they can't do it individually, they can't do it in isolation. It's about building that overall environmental picture, I believe, with regards to that and the extra resources and the extra services that will come in a few years' time. And with regards to the loss of the service, I will say during the time that the service has been suspended, there hasn't been a great deal of requests by members of the public asking when it's going to be reinstated. So I would suggest that there's been a relatively few residents that have actually missed that service, just as an overarching statement.
Thank you. Councillor Watts, did you want to come in on this?
Yes, thank you very much. If we look at the tables on page 13, you can see the monthly average collections for both textiles and glass. And whilst textiles has dropped over the years, and this year has dropped a lot, despite the fact that the first thing I think a lot of us did during lockdown was had a good clear out and sort out and everything. They've not been looking to put the textiles through the council. And the tonnage of glass collected, on the other hand, has gone up through the roof, a 44% increase year on year. Just let me shut my door because my daughter's turned her music up louder. To accommodate the increase in glass, we've had to suspend the textiles, and that has had before we got to that stage, that was having an impact on people like me who live at the end of the glass collection round. And there were a number of occasions that we simply didn't have our glass collected because the wagon was already full. And we've also had that with the brown bins as well on one occasion, that so many people had cut the lawns that the bin was full before it got to us. And so it's far more sensible actually. I want to provide every type of recycling that we can and every opportunity. It's sensible to put our resources into where they will generate the most use and give the best return. I'm sure that's something that Councillor Eason will agree with after what he said earlier on. So option one doesn't actually provide us with a good use of our money. It means we will be continuing to spend money on a service that is rarely used, and we would not be able to offer the increased service in glass which we need to offer to encourage people to recycle their glass. So it seems to me that option two would be the better suggestion. So I will move a recommendation that we select option two.
I second
that. Well, Russian people to second it.
Councillor Ball, did you want to come in there?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm feeling a bit missed about this textile service, the curbside textile service, because I've never had any information about it, and I don't think we've ever seen any around in my area where I live. So I'm not too sure that that's been a very successful service. No one's ever told me about it or said that they either agree or whatever. The other thing I'd just like to say, I've got three things to say, just to prove that I've not been asleep. I'd like to say with the garden waste, with the brown bins, wonderful service. I can't live without it. So please carry that one on. On page 16, where it says drinks returns scheme, I feel as if I'm going back to my childhood, because that's what we used to do when we were kids. You always took your bottle back and you got your money back. Or when you went to fetch your mother's stout from the beer off to put the label on the top, you made sure that you took it back the next time. So in many ways, I think we are sort of looking backwards, but maybe some things are good. But anyway, they are my 3 comments. I'm not undecided which one I'm going for, but I'll probably go for option 2, because the bottle service and the brown bin service and the black bin service, let's face it, in this borough, that is what people see. They pay their council tax, and that's what they get. And you know, if those services failed, then we'd have a revolution in Broxtowe. That's all I can say, because the people out in the street don't know we sat here all night discussing all these things. They just think that we get paid loads of money and do nothing. Anyway, that's what I'm going to say, and I'm sure I'll be going home in a minute, or to bed. Thank you.
So Councillor Fletcher again, I think.
No, it's fine. I withdraw my request to speak. Thank you.
Councillor Hallam, can you see that, Chair?
Councillor Skinner, you're on mute.
Thank you very much. I was sorry, excuse me, I've just put a licorice torpedo in my mouth because I wasn't expecting to go next. Thanks for throwing me that curveball, Lee. I support getting rid of the textiles collection to review another time, because to me this is about what resources have we got, and how can we get the best environmental bang for our buck and the best quality of service that we can deliver. The tonnage, the actual weight of material, that's the big thing, because I'm always looking at how heavy is what you're trying to recycle and how far does it need to go. Textiles are a lot lighter, and it's possible to store them for longer until you can take them to a place that's suitable, or until the space for charitable collection, etc. Whereas glass is something that is not space efficient. It needs to be dealt with locally, and it needs to be dealt with on bulk. And I want to say at this point, by the way, because I got in touch with Paul recently and said the bins, the actual, I overflow my green bags regularly. Let nobody make any judgments about my bottles of wine and the consumption thereof. But I said there's an issue with the bottle bank, the Broxtowe Borough Council run bottle bank near me. It's overflowing, and quick as a flash that was sorted out. And firstly, I'm really pleased that the residents are not only using the green bag collection, but they're also using the local bottle banks. And I'm also really pleased that we're providing that service, so when people, you know, it's hugely important. I'd go with that, and yeah, option B looks like the right one. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, thank you. It's a little bit difficult to make up my mind between the options that are put forward, because we've got no financial implications, and we don't know really. We've got a tonnage on the 2 tables on page 13 of glass collection and textile collection. I don't quite know, you know, what happens if we don't take textiles. Does it go to charity? And we get a feeling that it does. If we don't take glass, do people take it to the bottle bank, or do they stick it in the black bin? In which case we're paying, or somebody along the line is paying landfill tax on it, and it's obviously a bad thing. Equally, we get a receipt back for selling the glass on. I think we get a receipt back for selling on the textiles. It would, you know, it would have been good to have some financial implications of either decision within the report, so we can actually make a decision between the two. It looks like glass is probably the better way to go, but it's really only on a bit of a gut instinct. So I just wonder if Kevin has got some figures that could fill in the blanks for us on that.
Through you, Chair. Your gut instinct is right, Councillor Jackson. The glass will bring in, because of the tonnage, will bring in much more income than the textiles, which is diminishing, as we've seen by the statistics. So that's the reason the options are given. I appreciate and take on board the fact that perhaps some financial implications would have been useful in the report. However, it is as you feel, the glass tonnage will bring in more income. In addition, the vehicles that we would need to employ, because the glass tonnage has gone up, we would have to have more vehicles involved if we wanted to continue with the textile service. So that's more income or more expenditure in terms of fuel and maintenance of vehicles. So yes, the glass is by far the better option.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lally.
I'm surprised by some councillors wanting to, whereas earlier on they were complaining about the usage of fuel and such like, and yet now they want us to wander all over the borough collecting textiles for a minimal return at the end of the day, but maximum cost. Also, thank you. You've enlightened me why sometimes I put my glass bag out and it is not collected, and I get really annoyed about that. I'm doing my bit, and then the council don't seem to be doing their bit. But I understand now if it's a matter of capacity, then let's realign our resources and bring the capacity in where it's needed.
Right, I'm going to move to the vote now because I think everyone on there has had a go.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come back, please?
I think you had a turn, didn't you? I want to move to the vote.
Councillor McRae's indicated to speak, Chair.
Sorry, Chair, just as a point of order, I've actually asked to speak before Councillor McRae. I completely get that I've had an opinion, but I would like to come back, please.
Okay. Coming back is at discretion of Chair.
Yeah, I wanted to go to the vote, so I wanted to stop anybody adding any more now. So we've had a proposal and a seconder for option 2, so I'd like to go to the vote for option 2, whether you're for it or against it.
Okay, Councillor Ball.
For.
Councillor Darby.
For.
Councillor Eason.
For.
Councillor Fletcher.
Against.
Councillor Hallam.
For.
Councillor Jackson.
For.
Councillor Lally.
For.
Councillor McRae.
Yeah, I am for, but I don't appreciate being not allowed to speak, and I think Lee should have been allowed as well, but I am for it.
Here.
Councillor Marshall.
For.
Councillor Roberts Thompson.
Against.
Councillor Skinner.
For.
Councillor Watts.
For.
Councillor Willamott. Councillor Willamott.
Sorry, I was muted. For.
That's carried, Chair.
Thank you. So, where are we now? Well, I think now we're on the noting reports, am I right? Yes. Right, so item 7 is a list of noting reports. So the first one is for performance management and the review of the business plan, which is some little things. Okay.
On page 285, Chair.
Yeah. It's on page 1 of this now. Is that right? Page 1 of the extra bit. Page 1 of the noting reports. Am I there?
Yes, that's right. Get on the bit.
Yes, the first one goes from page 1 to page 9, Chair.
It does. So the recommendation is that we note this. They're all noting reports. So is this the one with the symbols? So if I go through these symbols page by page, and anybody can come in on anything they want to come in on. Is that okay? So on page 4, is there anything anyone wants to pick up about our tasks and
Please, Chair, Councillor Lally, we had the noting reports in the new format at my community safety the other day. I was led to believe that the noting reports are presented as an agenda item, and if people wish to ask a question on any of the reports, they get the opportunity to do so. But we don't actually go through all the reports.
All right then. Okay, so is there anybody who wants to make any comments about the first one, the first noting report? No. Anyone want to make any comments about the second one, progress on the environment and climate change? Anyone want to? Oh gosh, I've frozen now. I've frozen.
No, you're still there.
You're looking to heaven, I thought. Right, next one. Anyone want to talk about pride in parks then? Play areas and open spaces, improvements to the parks? No? Anyone want to talk about the air quality annual status report? No?
Councillor Chair. It's Councillor Thompson. If I can just speak on that, it's obviously the government was quite impressed by the air quality report, so congratulations to the officers involved.
Thank you. We'll just start the next one now. So now we're back on to item 8, which is the work programme, I believe. So, which I've lost.
It's page 19, Chair, of the main report.
Right. Okay, thank you. So the recommendation is that we consider the work programme and vote in favour of it accordingly or against.
Seconded.
Thank you. So any questions or comments on the work programme? Any additions?
Yes, please, Chair.
Please, Chair.
Is that Councillor Fletcher?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Just to add, if we can have an update on the Environment Bill and also an update on green number plates, just form part of the overall strategy. So it'd be interesting. Might be more the Environment Bill, maybe potentially February, depending on where we are with it in Parliament. And I'm sorry to just go back to this point, but I do want to raise this point. I do think it's a growing tendency of these committees to basically shut down member involvement. Just because I've had a say doesn't mean that I'm not entitled to another say. I'm elected to do that, so I just wanted to put that on record. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments on these? So is that Councillor McRae? Oh, it's just reiterating what you've said. Okay. So, do we take that to a vote though? Then all those in favour of the work programme, can you do that then, Lisa? Are we voting?
Have we had a proposal and seconder? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Ball.
For.
Councillor Darby.
For.
Councillor Eason.
For.
Councillor Fletcher.
For.
Councillor Hallam.
For.
Councillor Jackson. Councillor Lally.
For.
Councillor McRae.
For.
Councillor Marshall.
For.
Councillor Roberts Thompson.
For.
Councillor Skinner.
For.
Councillor Watts.
For.
Councillor Willimott. Councillor Willimott.
Sorry, 4.
Thank you. That's carried, Chair.
So I think that might be the end now. Right, well, thank you very much, and thank you, Kevin. You've had loads and loads of questions. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Yeah, good night, Chair.